Tonight, a dizzying day of escalating threats ends where it began. Tariffs set for Wednesday on Canadian steel and aluminum.
So this is a crisis. We're in it. It is getting worse as we speak.
We'll take you through a wild day on both sides of the border. And we'll break down Trump's tariffs. Does he have an actual plan? Snowbird alert, new requirements announced for Canadians crossing the U.S. border for an extended stay.
I feel as if we are being targeted.
And the U.S. and Ukraine say there is progress towards peace.
The challenge is to actually get into the nitty-gritty of what the ceasefire means.
Here's another challenge. Will Russia get on board?
From CBC News, this is The National with Chief Correspondent Adrian Arsenault.
Thanks for joining us. For the second time in Donald Trump's second presidency, a new set of punishing 25% tariffs have been imposed on Canada, and they are now in effect, this time specifically on aluminum and steel. The levy comes after a series of cross-border threats, the situation getting so heated at one point, the U.S. president said he would double the tariff to 50% on Canada, threatening to make Canada pay a price so large it would one day be read about in the history books, he said. Katie Simpson now with the initial escalation, what it took to cool tensions, and what comes next in this trade war.
It's the kind of whiplash Donald Trump is known for. Heated threats, a quick retreat, uncertainty, and instability ruling the day. All starting on social media, with Trump promising an additional 25% tariff to 50% on all steel and aluminum coming into the United States from Canada. Offended apparently by Ontario Premier Doug Ford, who imposed an energy surcharge as part of Canada's retaliation plan.
If the United States escalates, I will not hesitate to shut the electricity off completely.
The White House press secretary calling Ford's words egregious and insulting.
There would be grave consequences imposed on Canada if they think about shutting off electricity.
The White House then suggesting annexation as a solution to these Canada-U.S. tensions.
And I actually looked into some of the research about the cost of living in Canada, and the cost of living is much higher than it is here. The president has made it clear that he believes Canadians would be better served economically, militarily, if they were to become the 51st state of the United States of America.
As the briefing wrapped up, there was word of a breakthrough. U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick called Premier Ford with a request to drop the energy surcharge in exchange for in-person meetings this week, a deal the Premier accepted.
I've agreed to suspend temporarily, and we always have that tool in our toolkit, until we sit down over the next day or two.
Already counted, and I respect very much.
The Ford phone call seemed to please Trump, standing beside Elon Musk at an unusual event to boost his car company Tesla. The president hinted he was open to relief.
Just to be clear, that's for beautiful. The 50%, is that going to go into effect on Canada or no?
Which one?
The 50% tariffs?
I'll let you know about it. Yeah, okay. I'll let you.
Though he again suggested the long-term solution here is annexation.
When you take away that artificial line that looks like it was done with a ruler, yeah. And that's what it was. Some guy sat there years ago and they said, "Rah." Well, when you take away that and you look at that beautiful formation of Canada and the United States, there is no place anywhere in the world that looks like that.
Trump would revert back to his original threat, the White House confirming a 25% tariff on steel and aluminum with no exceptions or exemptions.
Thank you very much.
Amid this chaos, Trump had to face American business leaders who are urgently seeking clarity. But instead, the president offered more mixed messages.
They don't want to pay 25% or whatever it may be. It may go up higher, maybe go up higher.
Trump is urging Americans to be patient, even as he warns of what he calls disturbances to the cost of living. He insists tariffs will force companies to build factories in the U.S., and once that starts happening, he claims the economy will boom.
But Katie, it's pretty clear that some economic measures are definitely not booming. Investors sure seem to be jittery.
Yeah, the markets remain volatile. The S&P, the Dow, and the Nasdaq all closed lower. Trump dismissed concerns about those losses, even though in the past he's used it as a benchmark, the stock market, to measure his success.
All right, Katie Simpson in Washington. Now, you might wonder about the role of the U.S. Congress in this tariff tussle. It could get involved, could challenge the legal basis for the tariffs, but today the Republican majority made sure that Congress won't get involved. The Republican-controlled House not only blocked a Democratic Party call for a vote to challenge the tariffs, but as it then voted on an unrelated spending bill, it used a procedural mechanism to make sure no tariff challenge can be made for the rest of the year. The Canadian government says it is ready to respond to the new tariffs. Its goal, to inflict pain on the U.S. economy. Ashley Burke now with the work being done to prepare to punch back.
The next Prime Minister of Canada, Mark Carney.
When Liberals chose Mark Carney to replace Justin Trudeau, they all knew job one was how to handle Donald Trump.
We cannot let him succeed.
Now Trump's given him a taste of what he's facing. And as Carney met with Canada's ambassador to the U.S., the country's fentanyl czar, and the chief of defense staff, his supporters say he's ready.
There will be pain. Tariff wars cause pain. They are a bad idea. Canada's against tariff wars. But Mr. Carney, what he does is he becomes the team captain of a heck of a team. And what a team captain.
Trump's threat to double steel and aluminum tariffs caused chaos.
He's also an economic arsonist. He is setting fire to his own economy, not just us.
Even though today's threat vanished as quickly as it arrived, the steel industry is reeling.
We've already seen production curtailments, job losses, and deferral of investments in our facilities. So this is a crisis. We're in it.
Many will be hoping something good comes out of those talks set for Thursday in Washington, with Dominic LeBlanc joining Doug Ford.
Let's cool everyone down. Cooler heads have to prevail.
Ontario's premier says the surcharge he paused on electricity exports to the U.S. was part of the Team Canada approach to get the Americans' attention.
I've been mentioning it for probably the last 3 or 4 weeks, and then we had to make a move. Did it catch their attention? That's an understatement. They caught their attention.
The federal government says it's ready to respond to U.S. tariffs on any Canadian products, including steel and aluminum.
We will do everything proportionately to the U.S., and that will inflict major harm on the U.S. economy.
Carney posting online, "My government will keep our tariffs on until the Americans show us respect and make credible, reliable commitments to free and fair trade."
Doug Ford says he's hoping that when he and Dominic LeBlanc meet with Trump's Secretary of Commerce, Howard Lutnick, they can start constructive talks towards a new free trade agreement.
And so, Ashley, let's talk a little bit more about Canada's steel industry in particular, because the impacts of this tariff obviously could be massive.
Yeah, Adrian, the Canadian Steel Producers Association says it considers the U.S. market now closed and is calling on the federal government to give their sector a fighting chance by retaliating dollar for dollar with tariffs, releasing measures for workers, and making it mandatory that Canadian steel is used first on major infrastructure projects. The federal government is expected to respond tomorrow with matching tariffs.
All right, we'll see what happens. Ashley Burke in Ottawa. Well, there's a continued lack of clarity regarding Trump's various tariff threats. As we mentioned earlier, one thing is certain, the markets are reeling. Let's pick things up on Inauguration Day, when Donald Trump's love for tariffs was still only rhetorical. The financial outlook expressed through the market was relatively rosy, but on February 1st, Trump confirmed tariffs on Canada and Mexico, and markets took note, dropping dramatically, only to recover a couple days later when Trump announced a pause. But market uncertainty lingered, triggering several more down days. Then, on March 3rd, when the U.S. president confirmed that tariffs on Canada and Mexico were on, the market saw another major sell-off, then more whiplash, with Trump announcing another pause, except this time the pattern changed. That pause did not result in a sustained rebound, and those down days, well, they've continued. The TSX is off more than 3% since he took office, and in the U.S., the Dow Jones has fallen more than 4%. The tariffs have put the jobs and livelihoods of so many Canadian workers at stake, in businesses large and small, in communities far and wide. We spoke with some in Hamilton, Ontario, to hear what they're thinking and feeling.
Tariffs are definitely waning on everybody's mind. Everybody inside is worried. But nobody really says anything too much. They just go on with business as usual.
All this is doing is causing us to lose positions, business, probably contracts. We just got off a layoff and we're probably going to get another one if this continues.
Everybody's kind of worried about their jobs and what's going to happen, how much steel they're going to sell and ship. Yeah, it's on everybody's mind.
Canada exports most of its steel and aluminum to the U.S., and as Nisha Patel shows us, the impact of the U.S. tariffs is already being felt by companies in both industries.
Rahim Molu is preparing for tough weeks ahead.
The situation is worrying. It definitely keeps me up at night. And let's do it on this side too.
His small family-run business makes steel window wells and garden beds.
Screw on the outside. Yeah.
Just the threat of tariffs has already had an impact.
All of our American distributors have canceled their orders with us. I don't think we'll ever get all of that business back.
The tariffs target not just the raw materials, but finished products that use them.
So that really wipes out any opportunity to continue a profitable business into the United States. So we have to look at that very, very closely.
Canada exports more than 90% of its steel and aluminum south of the border. So companies are trying to come up with backup plans, though short-term pain may be difficult to avoid.
We're talking about developing new markets, increasing productivity and all those things, but I mean, that will take months, if not years.
Ontario and Quebec will likely bear the brunt of these latest tariffs. With tens of thousands of jobs tied to the industries, workers are on edge.
We're afraid of job loss. When job loss happens, even at one company, there's always a cascading effect.
When Donald Trump hit steel and aluminum with tariffs back in 2018, Canadian exports sank and metal prices rose. That lasted for about a year and disrupted other sectors too, from construction to transportation.
Essentially, you're increasing costs in the manufacturing sector, not just in Canada, but also in the U.S., and that's broadly not a good thing.
For the garden beds?
Molu says he's canceling U.S. expansion plans, worried these tariffs may be more long-lasting.
I think it's certainly a permanent shift. I think business is, the way our country does business moving forward is going to be different.
However tariffs play out, for many, much damage has already been done. Nisha Patel, CBC News, Toronto.
If the effect of tariffs on jobs and lives is clear, the reasoning behind Donald Trump's moves may be a bit hazy. Could it all be part of a coherent plan? We'll break it down in about 20 minutes. Well, the U.S. National Transportation Safety Board wants permanent changes to helicopter routes at Washington's D.C. airport following January's mid-air collision that killed 67 people. Its preliminary report highlights dozens of near misses in the past few years.
It shouldn't take a tragedy like this to occur. Unfortunately, one did, and so we are calling on action, but there clearly were indicators.
The Federal Aviation Administration says it will adopt some of the safety recommendations at that airport. January's crash was the deadliest aviation disaster in the U.S. since 2001. Well, Russia has reportedly intensified air attacks into the capital of Ukraine after a Ukrainian drone attack into Moscow. This is all happening as Ukraine says that if Russia is willing, it is ready to accept a 30-day ceasefire. That followed a meeting today with U.S. officials in Saudi Arabia. Briar Stewart on what might happen next.
The high-stakes talks were billed as a step towards peace and also a chance for the relationship between Washington and Kyiv to be repaired. And after hours of meetings Tuesday, dramatic progress on both fronts, with the U.S. saying that Ukraine has agreed to a 30-day interim ceasefire.
So the shooting will stop, the killing will stop, the dying will stop, and the talks can begin about how to end this war permanently in a way that's acceptable and enduring for both sides.
But Russia still has to agree. And a few hours before the talks began, Ukraine sent a message. Dozens of drones attacked Moscow and the surrounding area. At least 3 were killed. We understood there was a war, said this woman, but we didn't properly realize it until now.
You're not in a good position. You don't have the cards right now.
It was less than 2 weeks ago that this fractious White House meeting between the presidents from U.S. and Ukraine led to Washington halting military aid and curbing the sharing of intelligence. Now officials say both are back on.
Today, we demonstrated to all the world that we want a peace.
But even if Russia agrees to an interim ceasefire, getting a peace agreement will be exceedingly difficult.
It's going to be very hard to build any kind of trust or confidence between Russia and Ukraine.
Walter Kemp is a security expert from Canada, but now based in Austria. He's part of a group strategizing how a deal could work.
The challenge is to actually get into the nitty-gritty of what the ceasefire means, how it works, and also how it's implemented. There's no point in having a ceasefire that's then broken the next day.
American officials say the ball is now in Russia's court. Steve Witkoff, a special envoy for the Trump administration, will be in Moscow this week. And the U.S. Secretary of State says if Russia rejects the deal, it will be clear just what the impediment is to peace. Briar Stewart, CBC News, London.
There is a very tense and dangerous situation in a remote area of Pakistan tonight. Armed militants have hijacked a train carrying hundreds of passengers and are threatening to execute them. Pakistani troops were able to rescue some on board after a deadly exchange of fire, but the militant group known as the Baloch Liberation Army says it is holding more than 200 people hostage, and it's demanding the release of its jailed militants in exchange. And in the UK, one man is under arrest on suspicion of gross negligence manslaughter after this tanker collision in the North Sea. A Portuguese-flagged cargo ship hit a tanker carrying jet fuel for the U.S. military. The tanker was left with a gaping hole in its side, spilling fuel into the sea. The cargo ship is expected to sink. All crew members but one were rescued. That person is missing and presumed dead. And former Philippines President Rodrigo Duterte is under arrest tonight, expected to be investigated by the International Criminal Court for crimes against humanity. Cameron McIntosh shows us how that happened, plus the reaction in the Philippines and here at home.
Bound for The Hague, former Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte on that jet, extradited to Cheers.
I was brought here not of my own volition.
Just before that, he sat defiantly, challenging the authority of the International Criminal Court, which says it's investigating Duterte for crimes against humanity.
What is the law and what is the crime?
Duterte, a plain-spoken authoritarian, became president in 2016.
For your oath of office,
declaring, among other things, a sweeping war on drugs.
If you destroy my country, I will kill you.
Thousands were killed. As allegations of extrajudicial killings brought international condemnation, Duterte withdrew the Philippines from the International Criminal Court, widely viewed as an attempt to dodge accountability.
Suspects of crimes against humanity, like Rodrigo Duterte and others, can at least sometimes be arrested, and the process of holding them to account for their atrocities can be initiated. And I think that's what this stands for.
Ever polarizing, Duterte still has plenty of supporters, some rallying to his defense. In the Canadian diaspora, opinions are split. Along with confidence, there will be a conviction.
I think time will tell, right? This will be a test also of the ICC's jurisdiction.
Underlying all of this, a power struggle. Current President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. permitted the arrest.
Interpol asked us to do it.
He's been feuding with Duterte and Duterte's daughter, Sarah, the vice president, who calls this political.
There is no legal basis.
As for the International Criminal Court, it hasn't laid a charge yet. Cameron McIntosh, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Canadian snowbirds may soon have to register if they want to stay in the U.S. for more than 30 days.
I just think we're targeting the wrong people here.
Concern about the requirements on both sides of the border. Next. Plus, a BC community tackles the family doctor shortage.
It's small things from someone else's perspective, but a massive impact that it had on us.
What they're doing to attract and keep physicians. And later, a Canadian woodworker's invention brings music to the ears.
They burst into tears due to the emotional impact of it.
We're back in 2. Okay, so this mess is just outside Orlando, Florida. Dramatic footage of a woman riding out a fierce tornado from her vehicle. She survived this incident. Winds were 185 kilometers per hour in the strongest tornado to hit the area in decades. Well, some Canadians crossing U.S. land borders may soon be subject to new requirements. As Sophia Harris explains, it applies to trips longer than 30 days, so snowbirds are feeling especially targeted.
For years, Canadian snowbirds have glided across the land border into the U.S. But now they face headwinds. As part of an executive order signed by President Trump to help curb illegal immigration, the U.S. will soon require foreigners who cross by land and stay longer than 30 days to register online and carry at all times proof of their registration. This Canadian snowbird in Florida doesn't like the sound of that.
Well, it's uncomfortable. Let's hope it doesn't get worse in terms of getting in and out of the country. And they're even talking about fingerprinting.
What are the fines if you don't comply with this rule?
It's punishable up to a $5,000 penalty or 6 months imprisonment or both.
This U.S. immigration lawyer says she doesn't think snowbirds would likely be fined or fingerprinted. But in any case, she believes Canadians should be exempt from the registration rule.
I just think we're targeting the wrong people here in an attempt to make the entire United States safe. This is really, really an overreach, and a lot of Canadians are insulted by it.
I feel as if we are being targeted.
This snowbird owns a condo in Florida. Trump's tariffs inspired her to return to Toronto early. She says the registration rule is yet another reason she doesn't want to come back next year.
It's just one more thing added to a long list of things that I think is ridiculous. I mean, we've been good neighbors.
The Canadian Snowbird Association says it's working with U.S. politicians to try to get Canadians exempt from the registration requirement. But it doesn't have much time. Immigration lawyers tell CBC News the new requirement is set to take effect on April 11th. Sophia Harris, CBC News, Vancouver.
With Canada facing a shortage of family physicians, a northern BC community is making a big push to fill the gap.
We build relationships, and I will go as far as saying we've built a lot of friendships in the process.
The success it's had recruiting new doctors. Plus, when it comes to the tariff roller coaster, Andrew Chang asks a question that might be on your mind too.
Are these the actions of a man who knows what he's doing?
Does Donald Trump actually have a plan? And if so, what is it?
I think chaos is a big part of Trump's strategy.
The National breaks down the story shaping our world. Next.
The long journey for Jen Heil is complete.
And that was Canadian skier Jennifer Heil winning gold at the Turin Winter Olympics 2 decades ago. Now she's just been appointed chef de mission of Canada's delegation to the 2026 Milan Cortina Games. The 41-year-old says she will be a resource for athletes not only at the global competition, but in the lead up to it. With so many Canadians across the country searching for a family doctor, a rural BC community may have a model for success in both recruiting and retaining physicians. In the latest dispatch from our CBC News series, The Cure, Jennifer Norwell shows us how they did it.
From bustling Pretoria, South Africa, across the world to Williams Lake, BC. That was the big move Dr. Jacques and Mariska Newhoff made 5 years ago, along with their 2 young kids.
We came into a home with a stocked fridge and a pantry from the community that put it there for us.
Williams Lake is about 7 hours north of Vancouver, with a population of 11,000. The community greeted them with a warm welcome.
So those small things, well, it's small things from someone else's perspective, but a massive impact that it had on us.
Part of that welcome was formalized when the city of Williams Lake developed a program to recruit doctors to the community and the nearby municipality of 100 Mile House. It runs off of $176,000 of core funding from the local hospital board, and as it grows, is also generating revenue of its own. Last year, the BC Interior had 75,000 people waiting to connect with a family practice. Melissa Lapointe runs the program as the healthcare landing director. She arranges housing, transportation, daycare suggestions, employment opportunity for spouses, all that, and the little things.
We're going to leave a little basket of toys as a surprise on the kids' beds whenever they arrive. It's taking the time to ask about food sensitivities. We've gone as far as leaving a beer mug in the freezer for them.
Lapointe says they make social connections too, meeting up for coffee or a hike. She says it's the magic of the program.
We build relationships, and I will go as far as saying we've built a lot of friendships in the process.
Williams Lake says the program has been making a difference in healthcare there, and similar ideas have been tried successfully in other rural BC communities. Since 2023, 15 doctors have been recruited to work in Williams Lake. The Newhoffs encourage doctors to choose medicine in rural BC.
Seeing our kids and the opportunities that they have here, seeing how we have developed and what our opportunities are, it's amazing.
A small step that could go a long way to easing the healthcare crisis. Jennifer Norwell, CBC News, Kamloops.
Now it's time to dig deeper into the stories shaping our world. Another chaotic day of threat and counter-threat in the U.S.-Canada trade war ends in a deal to meet and talk.
Both parties are heated, and the temperature needs to come down.
It means Ontario's electricity surcharge to some U.S. customers is off for now, and it means a walkback from Donald Trump of a huge new threat that tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum would rise from 25% to 50%.
There's a term that applies to what the Trump administration is doing, weaponized uncertainty.
But is Donald Trump's tariff turbulence simply turmoil or a shrewd strategy with a hidden endgame? Andrew Chang, host of CBC's About That, breaks down the competing narratives on Trump's approach, shrewdly strategic or utterly spontaneous.
First, they were on.
We will tariff and tax foreign countries to enrich our citizens. 25% on Mexico and Canada.
Then they were off.
President Trump's tariffs against Canada will now be put on hold.
Then, while the first set of tariffs were paused, Trump threatens a whole new second set of tariffs, and then threatens a third set of tariffs, reciprocal tariffs stacked on top. But eventually, he loops back to the first original tariffs, promising they're definitely coming.
On the tariffs, is there any room left for Canada and Mexico to make a deal before midnight? And should we expect those Chinese tariffs, the extra 10%, to take
No room left for Mexico or for Canada. No, the tariffs, they're all set. They go into effect tomorrow.
And then those tariffs became real until they weren't anymore because they were partially delayed.
We spoke with the big three auto dealers. We are going to give a 1-month exemption on any autos coming through USMCA.
And then a big chunk of what was left of the tariffs was paused again. Here's how Trump justified it.
And I spoke to the president of Mexico, wonderful woman, today, and we helped them out with the problem they were having to do with the tariffs.
I helped them out with a problem they were having, as in the problem he inflicted and then paused, and then re-inflicted and then paused. Are these the actions of a man who knows what he's doing? Maybe not, but maybe. There are two main schools of thought when it comes to how Donald Trump is managing the world's largest economy. Either the pandemonium is planned.
Yeah, I think chaos is a big part of Trump's strategy.
There's a term that applies to what the Trump administration is doing, weaponized uncertainty.
Or
another possibility is Trump just likes the attention, just likes the drama.
I don't think there's a genuine economic strategy behind it.
Let's start with that. The argument that Trump has no coherent plan is supported by the fact that he sometimes has no consistent point of view. Take tariffs, for example.
Canada's a very bad abuser also. Vast numbers of people to come in and fentanyl to come in.
Legally, Trump has justified tariffs by branding the influx of fentanyl from Canada and Mexico a national emergency. But is that really the motivation? Or is it about boosting American manufacturing?
We don't need trees from Canada. We don't need cars from Canada. We don't need energy from Canada. We don't need anything from Canada.
Sometimes it seems to be about the principle.
Subsidizing Canada to the tune of over $100 billion a year. By the tune of about $200 billion a year.
And other times it seems to be more about power.
I'd like to see Canada become our 51st state.
He feels strongly that it would be very beneficial for the Canadian people to be the 51st state of the United States. They wouldn't be paying for these tariffs.
And what about the occasional lack of a unified message? Trump's own team sometimes seems left in the dark. Like whatever Trump was planning, if he was planning any of it, was never actually discussed out in the open. Take what Trump's Commerce Secretary said earlier this week on Fox News about tariffs against Canada and Mexico.
So I think he's going to work something out with them. It's not going to be a pause, none of that pause stuff, but I think he's going to figure out, you do more, and I'll meet you in the middle some way, and we're going to probably be announcing that tomorrow.
Except this was wrong. 2 days later, Trump did, in fact, issue a significant tariff pause.
We saw this a bit in the first term, but not nearly to this extent. But if you were to put a timeline of promises backtracking, it's just a zigzag pattern.
And this zigzagging isn't necessarily only a communication thing. Sometimes Trump's policies just aren't properly thought out.
President Trump has announced new tariffs on China that removed the de minimis exemption.
On February 1st, Trump issued an executive order that taxed Chinese imports under $800. For years, those imports had been duty-free. But then, 1 week later, Trump completely reversed course because there was no plan for how the US Postal Service was supposed to suddenly process brand new taxes on the mountain of stuff Americans order every day from sites like Temu and Shein. Packages started getting backlogged, so now this order is on hold until they figure it out.
It's the whims of somebody who seems to change his mind as fast as the rest of us change our underwear.
There's the constant drama, impulse control. If you want to make the case that there's a master plan, what is that master plan?
And there are countless examples of this apparent lack of a master plan, because many of the consequences that seem to invariably force Trump to take back what he says are foreseeable. The biggest example of this is how tariffs would affect the auto sector.
I'm afraid for both sides, for my workers, for the workers in the United States, but it's devastating. It'll devastate us.
Car manufacturing supply chains across Canada, the US, and Mexico are highly integrated and interdependent. Millions of parts and vehicles flow between the three countries every year. And economists predicted a 25% tariff would increase the cost to make each vehicle by thousands of dollars.
This industry has been integrated and grown together for decades. You can't unscramble the omelet one morning because you decide, you know what, you want to have a fried egg or a boiled egg. You made the omelet. You can't turn it into eggs over easy.
But it was only after Trump had dangled the threat of tariffs for 2 months and then actually enacted them that he decided, no, wait, I can't do that. I have to hit pause.
It's just a modification short term because I didn't want to hurt the American. It would have hurt the American car companies if I did that.
It was predictable to anyone paying attention to the details. I mean, the auto sector is so heavily integrated that, a piece goes back and forth multiple times. You can't build a car under these circumstances.
And the entire time Trump spends changing his mind, there's material harm to American businesses because they don't know which suppliers to use or what prices to charge.
What he's doing is he's creating uncertainty for people and companies that have to make pending investment decisions or future capital planning.
And consider one of Trump's most prized metrics for success.
Since my election, the stock market has set records. Everybody's stock has done well since the election.
But nowadays, asked by reporters whether his latest pause on tariffs had anything to do with stock market performance.
Well, no, nothing to do with the market. I'm not even looking at the market.
Because the market has slumped.
Stocks continue to fall today with fears of higher prices and escalating tensions.
He says, I'm not watching the market. Like, I believe that as far as I could throw a Honda Civic, right?
That the one thing he will respond to is when the stock market goes down. The stock market goes down and he changes his mind.
But in the meantime, there is real economic consequences for doing this, for the uncertainty that consumers and producers take.
But let's talk about the second possibility here, which is that Trump knows exactly what he's doing.
Okay, so after the break, Andrew will dig into the differences between what Trump says and what he does and what tariff outcome he might be aiming for. That is next. The U.S. president's tariff threats have rattled countries, markets, and industries. Is that the whole point?
He's essentially trying to intimidate or provoke some response that he thinks he'll be able to take advantage of.
All the uncertainty and chaos seem difficult to square with good results. But Andrew Chang, host of CBC's About That, shows us why Trump's unpredictability may be a tactical maneuver beneficial to him.
When you spend some time observing Trump, you start to notice more and more how he very clearly enjoys the persona that he's carved out for himself of being a disruptor. Like when he's naming those countries he believes treat the U.S. unfairly.
The European Union, China, Brazil, India, Mexico, and Canada. Have you heard of them?
Or when he's waving a pen at those same two economies who depend on the U.S. the most.
They've been in the news lately, haven't they?
Or when he calls the president of Ukraine a dictator and days later jokes that he would never say such a thing.
Mr. President, do you still think that Mr. Zelensky is a dictator?
Did I say that? I can't believe I said that. Next question.
I do think that he thrives on the idea that we're having this conversation right now about what his strategy is here. I think he thrives on the idea that he's unwieldy and nobody really knows what's really going on.
Yes, it's this old paradox of how a bug is sometimes actually a feature. As in, Trump's leadership may not simply be a series of unforced errors, but rather an intentional set of moves designed to throw opponents off balance.
We see a lot of what they call the madman theory, basically make yourself look so unpredictable that your adversaries don't know what to believe about you.
And let's stop to consider who Trump might consider his adversaries. Countries like Canada and Mexico? Yeah, and maybe not just Canada and Mexico.
The United States has been ripped off by virtually every country in the world.
But also, he's increasingly singled out and used incendiary language against those companies that do business with other countries.
Well, a lot of them are globalist countries and companies that won't be doing as well because we're taking back things that have been taken from us many years ago. Basically, you have globalist companies that have been ripping us off.
And I'll explain where I'm going with this. Trump has always been transparent about one thing, that he wants American manufacturing to return to America.
America will be a manufacturing nation once again.
And he's always been clear, tariffs are a way of forcing those companies who would dare to make product outside of the U.S. to relocate, to set up factories, to create jobs, to put America first.
He would, in his heart of hearts, like to have fewer cars built in Canada and Mexico and more cars built in Michigan and North Carolina.
So what they have to do is build their car plants, frankly, and other things in the United States, in which case they have no tariffs.
And so there's a strategic line you can start to imagine where maybe you never actually have to apply tariffs to anything because maybe the threat is enough.
He's essentially trying to intimidate or provoke some response that he thinks he'll be able to take advantage of.
And if that's the case, the rubber banding, the pendulum brinksmanship starts to make more sense. If he thinks this is the most painless way to get what he wants eventually, that the prospect of perpetual, unending uncertainty is too much to bear. So from industry's point of view, let's just do as Trump wants and move operations to the States.
He's a lot more willing to try things than your average politician. We've seen over the course of the last month and a half, his entire month and a half in office in the second term, that there's just less of a barrier there to trying things. The Republican Party has decided to kind of hand him the keys.
Now, to be both fair and clear, Trump's aggressive style has produced material change globally in a way that we haven't really seen under previous presidents. Just look to Europe as an example, how they're scrambling to shore up mutual defense and defense spending directly because of how Trump treats the NATO alliance. But turning back to tariffs, there are two complications with his strategy. The first is whether what he's demanding is even possible.
You can't move automotive plants in anything less than 5 years. You're gonna have to close a plant, you gotta break the supply lines, you gotta find new supply lines, find a new site, build a new plant, get your multimodal access and your power there, and that's $2.5 billion per plant that you don't have sales against to amortize that cost. These privately owned, publicly traded companies that begged him to pull back from the brink, he's gonna bankrupt them before he gets what he thinks he wants.
But the second problem is that there may be a point at which Trump's adversaries stop riding the roller coaster. Canada seems to want off.
As I always say, you know, you touch a stove once and you get burnt, you don't touch that stove again. The only deal is drop the tariffs.
We're going to ensure that the Americans understand how pissed off we are.
We cannot live as Manitobans with a persistent threat of Donald Trump's tariff tax.
And consider how differently the federal government has responded to this latest pause compared to the first time. After Trump's first pause a month ago, the Prime Minister immediately pulled Canadian counter tariffs off the table. Trade war averted. Whew. But his response this time?
I can confirm that we will continue to be in a trade war that was launched by the United States for the foreseeable future.
Now, the Canadian government has withdrawn a future second wave of tariffs, but has decided to keep its current first wave on $30 billion worth of American goods in effect. So if Trump does indeed have a master plan, what comes next?
I don't know. I left my crystal ball in the other room. I'm sorry.
I don't know, and he doesn't know, which makes it very difficult to negotiate. How do you play that game when the rules keep shifting on an hourly, daily, weekly, monthly basis?
But I think we can make at least one prediction, that whether you think Trump is governing by impulse or has calculated his moves, whatever he says publicly has less and less value. Because when he says he's going to do something, maybe he will and maybe he won't. Even signed agreements like trade deals stop being meaningful if the US president can simply decide unilaterally to violate them, or at least threaten to.
Just to emphasize what Andrew said, remember, although the U.S. president walked back his Tuesday threat to double tariffs on steel and aluminum to 50%, no one in this country or anyone else believes this is the end of the story. Coming up, a Canadian invention that is hitting all the right notes.
Some people actually burst into tears when they hear it. Everybody loves it.
A Canadian innovation pitch perfect, next in our moment. Who's that, you're asking? Well, that is Fron Riley, playing a tune for us at our Kitchener-Waterloo studios on his new invention, the Fron 2, a brand new musical instrument. So a chance meeting with Jesse Stewart, professor of music at Carleton University, led to the project and the unique sound that resulted, and that is our moment.
Ethereal, angelic. Some people actually burst into tears when they hear it. I built a new instrument, the Fron 2. I've built every single part, designed and built it all. What we have is 10 strings around the outside. They all connect to this bridge in the middle. As you turn the thing, you can apply various implements in order to make sounds. Very pleasant. I'm quite happy with it. And after I built the Fron, I put it on YouTube, not thinking that it would get more than maybe 1,000 or 2 views. Lo and behold, it just took off. 1.9 million views. I can't explain it. Everybody loves it. I have been getting orders. I have a waiting list of 23 people. And I've made 11 instruments so far. And they go all over the world. South Africa, the UK, Australia. I'm meeting so many new people, getting to hang out with musicians. I never expected anything like this. It's very exciting.
Okay, that's amazing. Maybe everything we all need. You heard him say he's getting lots of orders. He's going to have to expand production, and the way he's going to do that, he says, is he's going to recruit his nephew, who is also into woodworking, and together they will figure this out. From all of us at The National, thank you for being with us. You can watch anywhere, anytime on the free CBC News app and subscribe to The National's YouTube channel. I'm Adrienne Arsenault. Take care.